Hey folks, we are back again. Welcome YouTube land. I am Josh, student pastor here at Holiday Hill, joined again by Bella, Sam, Stephen, and Mackenzie as we get into part 2 of our Ruth series that focuses on Naomi as we look into bitterness and redemption. So, icebreaker question for you guys. Here we go. What is a redemption story that you think is pretty cool, whether fictitious or real? And by redemption, we talk about a situation that looks bad and then turned good. What do we got? Stories with happy endings, basically. What are ones that we enjoy?
I mean, I'll go right out the door. Friday the 13th, Jason Voorhees.
Friday the 13th. Please explain.
All right, so the first Friday the 13th, it's about a group of camp counselors that there's a child that they're supposed to be supervising. They neglect the child. He unfortunately drowns in the lake. In part 2, Jason Voorhees comes back as a fully grown man. They never explain that. It's weird. But he gets his redemption or his vengeance on the counselors that, well, not the counselors that wronged him, a new set of counselors, but you get the gist.
So, Bella, what do you have?
In Star Wars, in the beginning you think, oh, Darth Vader's this, like, real bad guy, and then in the end he ends up saving his son, and by sacrificing himself for the greater good.
Yeah, if you look at the entire Star Wars saga, I mean, Darth Vader / Anakin Skywalker, that is a whole redemption story. He was a hero. He then basically sold his soul to evil, and then in the end does the right thing, and does. He does sacrifice. That's a really, really good one. Kenzie, Steven, what do you guys got? Redemption stories.
Sirius Black and Harry Potter.
Sirius Black and Harry Potter. Work that one out for those that may not know the Harry Potter world.
Well, you know, Sirius Black came into the Harry Potter world, or the wizarding world. Aaron will kill me because I said it wrong, but...
We'll edit this.
Yeah. Basically, he comes in as a criminal, but trying to kill Harry. But actually, he was trying to kill someone else in the, at Hogwarts, and it's very sweet and very sad. Just read books 3 through 4.
His girlfriend is a hardcore Harry Potter fan. The fact that he's stumbling through this narrative is going to cost him so much.
Because I'm about to cry because of what happens at the end. He's my favorite character.
Steven, it's okay. We'll say nice things at your funeral.
Nice save. Nice save. Kenzie, what about you? Redemption story. What do you got?
The Beauty and the Beast.
Beauty and the Beast. Explain how that is a redemption story.
The Beast is all mean and stuff, rah, 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 in the beginning, and then at the end he turns into a nice, pretty, pretty prince.
Interesting. The ones I love, the redemption stories I love the best are probably the redemption stories that deal with history and the historic things, especially stories that they weren't supposed to work out or they were written off initially as the dumbest ideas ever. But the people did them. They pressed on and turned out well. One of my favorites. They were comic writers. Their names were Siegel and Schuster, and they created this character known as the Superman. And they tried to plug Superman to various newspaper strips, comic strips, and everyone looked at Superman and said, "This is the stupidest thing we've ever seen. No one's gonna love this. No one's gonna like this character. We don't even understand it. It's not gonna catch on." And yet they never gave up on it, and ultimately. I guess something happened with that idea. I don't know, the Superman idea. I'm not sure.
I've never heard of it.
What happened? It's not like I was wearing his shirt or anything in the last video or anything. So
That's what I was just thinking.
I'm not wearing my Darth Vader Tea Party shirt with Princess Leia.
He had a really bad movie when he fought Batman.
We don't talk about that.
No.
So we're going through the book of Ruth, and we start at the beginning, and now we're to the end. I want to give you guys a little bit of context for the in between. Again, when we last saw Naomi, she basically is written off. She wrote herself off. She says, "My name's Mara. It means bitter. There is no hope for me. Just give up on me. I'm just going to basically go home and die. There's nothing more I can do for myself. The Lord has afflicted me. I am destroyed. I am ruined." Ruth sticks with her. They go back home to their town, Bethlehem, which is Naomi's hometown. And they can't do much for themselves as two widowed women. And Naomi's pretty much given up. So Ruth has the job of trying to find food, not just for her, but for both of them. So there was a tradition they would go out into fields, and after at these rich men's fields, these rich people fields, anything that was left over, you could basically take the scraps. And that's what Ruth was doing. She was basically getting the scraps out of these fields to feed both her and her mother-in-law. And she catches the attention of this guy named Boaz. And he's a pretty well-to-do nobleman of the time. And he finds Ruth very attractive. And Ruth actually kind of finds Boaz attractive, and she mentions this in passing to Naomi. And it was like, "Oh, really? Cute guy." And then the gears start turning. Like, he's technically a distant relative. He's like a distant cousin of ours, as a matter of fact. And the cultural tradition of the time, again, if a husband dies, the brother's supposed to step up, but there's no brother, a relative's supposed to step up. It's basically called a kinsman redeemer, if you will. And she basically, at that point, plays matchmaker for Ruth to set Ruth up with Boaz and get them together, if you will. Now, again, her context, I don't think she was looking for anything for her in return for this. Because, again, she was given up. She had already tapped out on life. This was something for Ruth. She was doing this specifically for Ruth so that Ruth would have a life and a future apart from herself. That was her context. So, again, in the previous chapters, Naomi saw promise between Boaz and Ruth. As a result, she did try to play matchmaker. So, first question, have you ever tried to play matchmaker with anyone? Has anyone tried to play it with you, and how did it turn out? Has anyone tried to play matchmaker with you guys? Like, yeah, I got the perfect person for you.
Well,
you know,
considering I'm still single, I'm guessing no.
they have a wonderful personality. Their eyes will sometimes point in the same direction, but they're wonderful. You should totally give them a chance. Like anything?
Yes.
Okay. Was that one a little too real, Sam?
A little bit, yeah.
like matchmaker stories. What do we got? Yes. Yes, Mackenzie.
There's once this guy. His name is Josh, and he keeps telling me that my best friend and I are meant to be together, and then no.
Interesting.
That's crazy. Hey, fill me in. Whose sweatshirt are you wearing?
No one's.
Man, this just got awkward really fast.
You know, because you said no one's freaked out like that, they're just gonna think
Did you
that
say
it's true.
Steven, did you say one of your friends tried to play matchmaker with you?
I'm gonna get shot if I say her name, so...
A friend who shall remain nameless. Continue.
Helped with setting up me and my current girlfriend.
Oh, very nice, very nice. I think inadvertently played matchmaker once. I tried not to, I really don't, and I did it once, and it was inadvertent. One of my very good friends was going through a lot of life change at the time, and I say, hey, I'm leading a Bible study for young adults, you should come be a part of this. And there was a girl there, and she's really sweet and nice, and they're now married and have 2 kids. So, like I said, I guess technically I did, but it wasn't intentional by no means. It was one of those things like it just kind of happened, if you will. But that did happen. Like I said, they got married and had 2 kids, so I guess it turned out well for them at the end of the day. I think they're still happily married, as a matter of fact, and they're 2 wonderful folks. So let's go back. So that's got the segue into the passage we're going into, and we're looking now in Ruth chapter 4. And so Ruth and Boaz ultimately do get married. And as they get married, they actually end up having a kid. And so we'll start at verse 14. The women said to Naomi, praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life, sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you, and is better than 7 sons, has given him birth. Then Naomi took the child, laid him over her lap, and cared for him. The women living there said, Naomi has a son. And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David, as in King David. And for us believers in Christ, is also as a result part of the lineage of Jesus himself.
So it's kind of important.
So kind of a big deal. So Naomi has a grandchild. And what they say is like Naomi had a child. What does a grandchild do to a person? Do we know people who became grandparents in our lifetime or witnessed them become grandparents? What did it do to them? Like your parents became grandparents, as a matter of fact. Not by you, but by your older sister.
Yeah.
Just clarifying.
I don't have any children.
No children for Mackenzie. But like, what did it do for your parents becoming grandparents for them?
Well, at this time I was like 5, so I don't really remember. But I remember when Pearson was born that my mom was like really happy. She wasn't happy like at first, like when she found out that Chelsea had been pregnant. But then, like, you know how, like, you have the grandchild and then you're like, oh my gosh, little bundle of joy into the world, oh. And then now he's, like, 11 and, like, big.
Like, Steven, you have an older sister who just recently got married. If your sister has a baby, what do you think that's going to happen with your mom and your dad?
Lord help that child first off, but,
I think you're out of the will at that point, I think is what's going to happen.
Yeah,
I think Steve is officially out of the will. Like, there's all this stuff's going to go to the grandbaby. You get nothing. Christmas comes around, Steven. We couldn't get you anything for Christmas. Here's a $20 gift card to Best Buy. There's $5.55 left on it because all of the budget had to go to grandbaby X, if you will.
yeah.
Poor Steven.
I full-heartedly agree with that statement.
We're going to change your bedroom into the nursery for the grandbaby now.
like
We're going to put you in the garage.
I just made another room in our house. And it's a new room. It's my sister's old room since she moved out.
It's going to be the grandbaby's room in a few years.
Exactly.
I'm thinking Miss Trish should be the best grandma.
Miss Trish probably would be the best grandma ever. I will say this: my parents, when my wife and I, when we had our first kid, and my parents then become grandparents, and also my wife's parents too. Like my parents especially, they lightened up a whole lot, especially my mom. My mom was like this very strict, no nonsense kind of person, and that mindset lifted ever so lightly. And so, yeah, a grandchild, I've heard it say this: grandchildren are God's gift to parents for not killing their children. You didn't kill them. Thank you. And as a result, here is your blessing, a grandchild that you can spoil the living heck out of. So which leads to the next question. What's the relationship with your grandparents versus your parents? Like, what's that dynamic look like for you guys?
Well, my grandma, whenever she knows that we're coming down to her house, she'll call my mom in advance and say, oh, what do they want for their meals? And anything we say, she'll literally get. Whereas my mom, if we're going down the aisles in the store and I say, ooh, Mom, a box of Cheez-Its, can I get it? She's like, no, you don't need that. Let's move on. My mom, to this very day, anytime it's the kid's birthday, whatever they want, she fixes it for them. Like, name your meal, I'm fixing it. And there's, like, no argument. It can be the most expensive, most time, consuming thing. Doesn't matter. I'll make it for my grandbabies. Sam, what about you? Grandparents versus the parents relationship?
I can actually throw this example out recently.
Uh-huh.
So my grandparents bought a new house, moved there, and they're trying to sell the old one.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a phone call one day from my grandmother asking me if I'd be willing to help them move.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. So I drove down there and spent the day loading up the truck with the furniture, moving it, setting it in place so they could sell the house because they wanted to make it look more lived in when they sold it.
Yeah.
About a month later, got the phone call that they needed to move everything back. Went down there, helped them out. No sass, no back talking, nothing, because they're my grandparents. I love them. Mm-hmm. If my parents were to ask me to do that, my first response was, you should hire a moving company. And when I ended up helping anyway, it would be full of sass and back talk and moaning and groaning.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the same way. My parents ask me to do anything, I will say no. When my grandma calls me and goes, hey, Steven, can you come down here and change a light bulb? I'll be like, sure, Grandma, I'll come right down. Give me 5 minutes.
Okay, Mackenzie, you mentioned before we started filming that apparently, like, you'll still sit in the lap of your grandparents?
I still sit in Grandma's lap.
You still...
And Nanny, which is my mom's mom.
Okay.
So my mom's grandma.
Okay.
I still sit in Nanny's lap. And then, but she's like 80-something years old.
Oh,
so
wow.
I don't, like, fully put all my weight on her because I'm scared I'm going to, like, crush her.
Yeah.
But then there's my Nana, and then I'll just sit in my Nana's lap, and then she'll rub my back. And then now my aunt has a child now, and he's just turned 1, actually. So now I'm like, I used to be the youngest grandbaby, and now I'm not, so...
Now, my grandparents have since passed, but when my dad's mom, my paternal grandmother was still alive, she had 9 grandchildren total. I was number 9 of 9. So, and my dad was the baby of the family, so I was the baby of the baby. So if you go into her house, like, there's pictures of all the grandbabies. There's pictures of all. There's 9 of them, and it's not a large house, but there's pictures everywhere. But mine was probably the most prominent picture of them all. Like, I wasn't just the grandbaby. I feel sometimes I was like the favorite one, if you will. Because if you go into her house, like, all my cousins are like on this one wall right here, and I'm on that wall. But if you go to any bedroom, there's pictures of me. If you go into the living room, there's pictures of me. And I was spoiled rotten. That she would just give me money because, like, sometimes you get money for, like, your birthday or something. Not me. I'll get money because I existed. I was spoiled rotten. And I didn't appreciate the utter hypocrisy because even my own dad's like, she never treated me like this. And it didn't happen. It didn't dawn on me until I had kids myself. And again, my mom was a very strict, no nonsense. And she was also one of those, like, hippie fruit nut kind of things. Like, I couldn't have, like, sugary cereal, artificial colors, yellow 5. Couldn't do any of that stuff. So, like, my cereal had to be, like, Honey Nut Cheerios. That was the most sweetest cereal I could get. She wouldn't let me have Cocoa Puffs or Lucky Charms or any of the good stuff. And so my son spends the night over at her house and comes back, and that morning, as on their way to church, Sunday morning, she took him to McDonald's so he could have a McFlurry for breakfast. Yes. I'm like, you gave my son a McFlurry for breakfast. This is garbage. This isn't fair. That's just how grandparents are.
I remember when I went with you and Esther and I went over to your mom and dad's house for, I think it was Noah's birthday party.
Yeah.
And Avonlea was like running around. Your mom was literally like running around with her, and I only met your mom. I think like
my mom
twice.
never did that with me ever. They gave me a video game system in a room. Stay there. So the grandparent relationship is huge, and it is. It's full of love. Let's face it. It's full of love, full of lots of love. It's full of lots of fun. It's full of lots of blessing. And put that in context. Naomi has been given this. And listen to what the women said here. The Lord has given this thing to you. The Lord has had this occur to you. And on this day, he has not left you. The Lord hasn't left you on this day. You feel he afflicted you. No, he hasn't left you. This is a thing. It's one thing to be gifted with a child. It's another thing to be gifted with a grandchild. And that was huge. So they named the child Obed, which, one of the top names in the baby book nowadays, as we know.
100%.
Here's the thing. Obed means this. It means service or worship. That's what the name means. Do you think there was a significance here? Naming the child basically worship or service. Do you think there was a significance in the name here?
Probably.
And what would the significance be? What would the connection be? If there is one, what's the connection?
Well, I mean, I'm sure she, worshipped God over this baby.
Mm-hmm.
But something I saw was, Obed was, am I saying that right?
Obed, yeah.
Yeah, Obed. Was the father of Jesse, who fathered David.
Uh-huh.
Didn't David write Psalms?
Yeah, he did.
Which is basically just a whole bunch of worship songs in that time frame, which I thought that was cool.
We'll also consider the connection. If you're looking at Obed versus David, what was Obed to David? Grandfather. Take that for what it's worth. But yeah, you have a woman who changed her name to Bitter. And now you see the end of the story. She has a grandchild, and that grandchild's name is worship. That grandchild's name is service. And again, at its core, there's worship, but we talk about worshiping our Creator, worshiping God. But then there's also service. Service not just to God, but to other people. And think of that connection with Ruth. Ruth served her mother-in-law in the darkest moments of her life. Even when Naomi wanted to give up, Ruth was still loyal there. I think that's a wonderful and beautiful picture. Naomi's redemption came without intention on her part. What does it mean to the formula belief that God helps those who help themselves? Because sometimes people say that, well, if you want something to happen, if you want God to help you, God only helps those who helps themselves. What does this say to that formula? If you look at the life of Naomi here.
I mean, it's to a degree it supports it, but to a degree it really doesn't. Yeah. Because on one hand, God helps those who help themselves. Well, yeah, she was doing everything she could to help her and her daughter, get by.
Yeah.
So, this blessing came, and it's one of those, well, God helps those who help themselves. But at the same time, it's one of those, well, this didn't happen because she was actively, just trying to survive.
Yeah.
This came because there was a bigger plan in motion, and this was all part of it.
Yeah. Sometimes we get what we don't expect and we don't deserve. And by definition, that's called grace. We are given things that we don't expect, and we're giving things that we do not deserve. And that's called grace, by its definition. Grace isn't something, by definition, that you can earn. You can't get grace. You can't earn grace. Like, Bella, you are so awesome. You showed up today, and you're involved in this thing. I'm just going to give you something in resort of that. No, that was a reward for your hard work. That's not necessarily grace. Grace is unmerited. Grace is undeserved. Grace is unexpected. And sometimes we live in the formula like, if you want God to do something good for you, you got to do something for God, or you got to do this, that, or the other. And though there's goodness in that in itself, there's good things that it's wonderful that we serve. It's wonderful that we worship. It's wonderful that we help our fellow man, especially in times such as these. However, there's a difference here of we reap a reward because we did X, Y, and Z versus we were given something and it had nothing to do with what we did. Do we see the difference there? Do we see the difference there? Let's face it. Grandchildren, at face value, can't do much for their grandparents. Not when they're born. It's not like they can help them move. It's not like they can, fix them a meal. It's not like they can, even make them a cool little card. You can't, those things aren't there for them. But grandparents show tons of grace. In other words, it's not your birthday, but here's $10 just because. It's not a special holiday or occasion, but I just love you so much. And there's layers that are happening here in the end of this story of true redemption. It started out bad. It ended out wonderful. And you see the redemption on multiple levels. You see it in Ruth. You see it definitely in Naomi. But you also see it in the perspective of a larger scale of God himself. God himself showed grace to this family. He didn't have to. There was no incentive that you had to do this, God, or else. No, he can do whatever he wants. He can work through whoever he wants, whenever he wants. And he did this for them. He gave them grace. And in this grace, we see a beautiful picture of redemption, a bad situation that turned good. And again, her intention, I don't think necessarily was, I'm going to help me. The intention was, I'm going to help Ruth. Ruth stood by me. She was a friend and a family member in the darkest times. I need to make sure Ruth is doing well. I need to make sure Ruth is taken care of because I don't got much time left. I don't think she was looking at it from the perspective of what can I get for me. Again, for herself, she had already given up. This is a woman who gave up and in the midst of this decided, even though I'm giving up, I shouldn't give up on this person. I'm going to work for them. And this is exactly what we see. And it's a really cool picture of redemption in the midst of bitterness. And I know today, as far as cultural context is concerned, we are dealing with people who are dealing with loss. We are dealing with people who are dealing with hurt. And we are dealing with people who are probably struggling with a lot of bitterness. And there are things you can turn to. You can turn to alcohol. You can turn to substance. You can. It's not good, but you can. You can do those things. Or you can wait and hope that perhaps, I'm not saying definitely, but perhaps God can redeem this situation and give me grace in the most unlikely time, from the most unlikely place, in the most unlikely of circumstances. And when we look at the grand scheme of what benefits we'll reap from each one, I think that's a good one to focus on. When we're in these moments of darkness, first of all, like with the Ruth situation, look for friends who stick by you thick and thin, cherish them and value them more than anything else. But then number two, trust that God can redeem this in a way that I don't even know is going to be possible right now. And hold on to that for as long as you possibly can. And we see this with Naomi. And I don't think she was necessarily even holding on. It happened. It fell in her lap. It wasn't even an expectation. And I think that's a really cool story of redemption and God's goodness. So this wraps up our series on Ruth. Join us next week as Mackenzie will be leading us in a series on friendship, Jonathan and David, the grandson of Obed. So, see you later. God bless. Bye.